Hey everyone, welcome to the Slice of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is Dr. Mark Mofid, the founder of SYLKE. How's it going?
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
I'm excited to have you here. Would love to really kind of hear the origin story. So you spent many years as a plastic surgeon. You know, what made you want to, like, what was that turning point to pursue the development of SYLKE?
You know, when I was a kid, there was a fable I remember that I had heard. It was called the Emperor Has No Clothes. It's about a little kid that notices something very obvious, but all the adults in the room who had probably been around it long enough that they were too embarrassed to even say anything kind of went along with the ruse. And my own experience was that I was never happy. I was never satisfied with the wound closure device products, and no one was talking about it. You know, we had used this 62-year-old technology that 3M had developed in 1962 called the SteriStrip, and that was essentially the innovation from 60 years ago was still considered to be the standard of care. And I can't think of a single example of anything we do in life, you know, that's basically been unchanged for 62 years. But that was, you know, that is it. We do these very sophisticated, innovative surgical procedures today. And then at the end of the operation, we put on this 62-year-old technology that never really made any sense. You know, SteriStrips are inelastic pieces of paper or rayon tape. They don't expand with postoperative swelling or edema. You can't put them on areas of the body that require motion, like joints. And so when postoperatively, you know, one of two things happen, which is they either fall off, which is what happens roughly 75% of the time, or patients get blisters, which we found in a separate study that we, you know, are publishing in a couple of months that they cause blisters almost 10% of the time. So that never really made sense. There was another iteration. I've been in practice now for 20 years. I was on faculty at UCSD for about 15 of those 20 years now. I'm on faculty at Johns Hopkins. But about 12 years ago, there was a new technology that was introduced called Bond. And the reason that it was important is because I embraced it just as many other surgeons had. I was actually in practice as a resident in training in 1998 when 2-octyl cyanacrylate technologies, i.e. Dermabond, was FDA approved in 1998. And we just basically embraced, you know, that technology as a field in medicine without really understanding the science behind it. So again, it's one of these things which never really made any sense to me. You know, if you were to talk to the vast majority of surgeons that are in practice today, you know, probably 95% of them either have used or currently use 2-octyl cyanacrylate technologies, and very little, like none of them know the data. And so I was having a lot of problems in my own practice. Initially, I thought it was me, and then I realized that it was everyone. And so I just kind of made it my mission, and you know, my life at that stage started about 4.5 years ago to try to basically R&D a better product. And then as soon as, you know, we came up with it, you know, we just wanted the whole world to know about it because I think it's the best product on the market today.
Now, in developing SYLKE, like, what our audience loves hearing this type of stuff, what unexpected challenges did you encounter? And that could be either scientifically or during the testing process. And then, you know, how do you overcome those challenges, or how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, for me, it was, you know, very first time I had ever done anything like this. And so, um, you know, I can't really say I have anything to compare it to, but um, I would say that the initial challenges were, you know, someone who's never done this sort of thing before, just assembling a team, assembling the funding that's necessary to carry out the mission, and obviously the R&D side is sort of working through it, hiring consultants, which are very expensive, time and labor intensive. But once you work through the logistics of it, which we did, the next big, thing is, it's sort of like you think you've crossed the finish line once you've got a product available on market, and really you're just starting the race. And so for me at least, the um, the difficult part was, well, how do we get this into the hands of surgeons? Fortunately, we have a low cost enough uh, product that getting it to the hands of surgeons at no cost, and hospital systems for that matter, wasn't too onerous on us. Um, and then we began running up against, hospital systems have all sorts of contracts with their current suppliers. Without naming names, there's one 800-pound gorilla, in this space, and it was just very difficult to get hospitals to agree to try this product, recognizing that they, are concerned about, violating existing um, contractual agreements that they have. So having the best product, I think that most Americans like to think that, we compete based on cost and quality, and that if you are a better product and you can provide a better product to market at a lower cost, that you have, at least a seat at the table. And the reality is that that's not always the case. So we're still, working through those. But I can tell you that, there's about 100 hospital systems now, throughout the United States where we're available, and that's, only 9 or 10 months that we've been around. So we're working through that, and I think we've been very successful.
Now, given that traditional wound dressings are so ubiquitous, how do you envision SYLKE integrating into everyday surgical protocols across all these different fields of medicine?
Well, I can tell you that, and take this as my opinion, and I'm sure that if you were to ask 10 different surgeons, they, probably get 10 different opinions. But this is purely my opinion. My opinion is that two-octyl cyanacrylate technologies, i.e., Dermabond or Dermabond-like products, really have no place in the practice of medicine or surgery. I consider them to be unsafe for human use and dangerous. I've looked at the same data that the FDA looked at in 1998 when they approved it for general human use, and I would not have made that same decision at the time or today with the data that they had. I mean, at the time, they showed a 400% increase in the risk of infection by using that product, and I think that that's unacceptable. Um, and now that I understand the science behind it and how through a degradation hydrolysis reaction, two-octyl cyanacrylate byproducts release formaldehyde, um, and there's no safe amount of formaldehyde that you can expose a human being to, that makes it a better product, or worthwhile product, especially when there's so many alternatives now currently on the market. So I see still supplanting current two-octyl cyanacrylate use. I don't think that we necessarily um, compete with that product. I think that's a product that probably should be relegated to the dustbin of history, so to speak. I think there are other good wound closure device products on the market. They all do different things. I think there are good surgical dressings on the market. I think there's good technologies on the market. I think having a skin friendly, silicone-based adhesive is a good thing. We're a wound closure device in addition to being a dressing. So I think that there's a seat at the table for more technologies other than our type of technology. I'm merely just saying that I don't think that two-octyl cyanacrylate products should have a seat at that same table.
Now, a lot of our audience probably it's probable that they saw your recent funding announcement, right? That happened in the last few weeks. What are some of your immediate priorities after raising this? I think it was about 5.5 million, right, in seed funding.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah.
what are some of your immediate priorities after this raise? And I guess can you give us a glimpse into um, just what's next?
Yeah, sure. So that was actually the easiest part of it, was raising the money. We started the raise what was it, like 8 months into the, since the release of the product in December of 2023. So I'm not saying all of the shareholders, but nearly. This was a closed round. We only invited people that we, primarily surgeons who we felt had a good enough experience with it that they understood the technology. And so let's call it 2/3 or more of the shareholders currently, there were 66 shareholders that were part of the seed round, were all active users of the product. And so we felt very good about that. These are people that had used product for a period of 6 months or more, that they were very comfortable with the technology, that they saw the value add. Many of them come from different specialties in medicine, OBGYN, primarily orthopedic surgery, spine surgery, cardiac surgery, for example. And so there are different expectations for product use. I think that the next sort of big thing that we want to do is to create a knee arthroplasty dressing specifically used in orthopedics. It would be a wider SKU, probably a very similar SKU. We just got off the phone with an adhesive supplier. We may wind up changing the adhesive. You wouldn't expect the same adhesive to be used on delicate breast skin, for example, for plastic surgery that you would expect to be used over a knee, which is thicker skin that behaves differently. It's a higher motion area. It's not just one that's exposed to edema. So we may wind up using a different adhesive. So we're planning on R&Ding a knee arthroplasty dressing. There's 900,000 joint replacements that are done per year, and it's a massive market that we'd like to be, in that space. There are different expectations for spine surgery, for cardiac surgery, and for OBGYN as well. And then we have some interesting products that we're planning on R&Ding, among them being a skin graft donor site product. I think there's a very large role for using a regenerative product like SYLKE Fibroin to both enhance wound healing, at burn centers, where you're doing a partial thickness skin excision to harvest that skin for use on another part of the body. The question is, how do you treat the donor site? We currently treat the donor site the same way we did back when I was in training in the 1990s. I think that there's a huge opportunity for innovation in that field. It's a multi-billion-dollar market. And then other interesting uses of silk would come down the road. I think that it could potentially be an excellent wound accelerant. There are currently animal-derived bioproteins that are used for chronic wounds, acute surgical wounds, for traumatic soft tissue injuries, and I think there's a large role for that. There's some interesting applications. We still affix catheters and drains to the human body the same way they did 20 or 30 years ago. We harpooned the patient with a suture. I don't think that really makes any sense. And using this product, for example, secure a drain or a catheter, I think there's a big role for that. I think there's in the retail environment, we currently use Band-Aids today the same way we did when I was 5 years old, which is to say that there is a non-adherent gauze dressing with an adhesive, and that never really made sense to me because you're not necessarily holding the skin edges together. And so it's painful, and Band-Aids or Band-Aid-like products, they get soggy and wet with showers, and they've got to be changed every day. Well, I think we have a product that doesn't need to be changed every day and holds the skin edges together. There may be a role for using this in emergency departments instead of using, sutures. We currently, treat lacerations the same way we have for thousands of years, which is, you have to suture it with a needle and thread, which is painful for the patient. It requires an ER visit. It requires lidocaine to be used and an expensive laceration tray to be used, and a practitioner that's going to spend 20 minutes suturing a laceration. I think that in 5 to 10 seconds, you can probably have a similar, if not better, outcome by using a silk-like technology as a wound closure device for lacerations. Not complex lacerations, but say sub 2 centimeter, simple lacerations. So there's a lot of role for research and development, and I plan on responsibly deploying a lot of that capital into developing some of these ideas that we have.
Last question for you as we wrap up here. Looking back at your career, what advice would you give to other surgeons or medical professionals that are considering branching into entrepreneurship?
I think that creativity is underrated in a lot of respects, and I think that you have to maintain that sort of creative spirit. A surgical residency training program is very much like the military. There's a top-down command structure, which tends not to reward people that are creative individuals that want to think outside the box. And so, even though the training is somewhat militaristic, I think it's important to kind of forget that when you first get into practice, and to try to think more creatively, and to try to be that 9-year-old kid that in some cases says that the emperor has no clothes. Just because something's not been developed yet, and there's something that doesn't really make sense to you, doesn't mean that there's no other way. And I think it's important to ask those kinds of questions, like, well, why hasn't this been developed yet? Can we do things better? This is, to be quite honest with you, a fairly low tech product. And if you look at the Da Vinci robot system, or something that required potentially billions of dollars of capital, 10, 15, 20 years of technological advancements in both robotics, artificial intelligence, and software development, computer programming. This is this is about as low tech as you get in medicine, but it simply was a giant hole that had never been addressed. And there's lots of things that I can think of that are pretty similar. So just because it's easy, don't overlook it.
I love it. I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. Look forward to future conversations, and congrats on the raise once again. Best of luck with everything.
All right. Thank you very much, Jared. It's been a pleasure being here.